Joining us now is Senator Angus King of Maine, who serves on the Intelligence and Armed Services Committee. Senator, thank you for being with us. This is just one example of how devastating this war is for Ukrainians. We've seen desperate mothers carry their children.
Devastating and senseless. Vladimir Putin has made a terrible miscalculation. He thought this was going to be a walkover, and that somehow remember at the beginning, Andrea, he was talking about their army being peacekeepers. I think he thought they were going to be greeted as some sort of liberators, and instead they're meeting fierce resistance and the damage. And what I really fear, Andrea, is over the next several days, there's going to be a ramp up in that kind of brutality of hitting civilians. And we're already seeing that in Mariupol and some of the other smaller cities, and they're lining up to do it to Kiev. It's tragic and senseless, and Putin ought to be looking for an off-ramp instead of escalating something which, in the end, I don't think he can win.
Well, there's a real question as to whether he's getting real information from the front. Perhaps he's just frustrated and angry at the slow march of that convoy.
Well, I think I don't think he is. Well, he's created a situation. One of the principles of leadership is you got to have people around you who aren't afraid of you, who can tell you the truth. Otherwise, you make big mistakes. And this may be a world-class example. And you see these pictures of him at this long table with people down at the far end, and all the public sources. There it is. You know, that's not a recipe for open and honest discussion. We saw him dressing down his intelligence chief. Apparently, from open source reporting, he was warned that this could be more of a problem, and he was warned that the sanctions could be a bigger problem for the Russian economy. But he had this delusion about greater Russia and that Ukraine was really part of Russia. And he grossly underestimated the resistance of the Ukrainian people, and also two other things: the leadership of President Zelensky, and also the leadership in the West, the unity that we've seen. I mean, for Lord's sake, when Switzerland is getting involved in something like this, you know that you're turning quickly into a pariah state.
For all that the West is now doing, Switzerland, you mentioned Switzerland, Germany changing its policies on weapon deliveries. Will the weapons, will the supplies, the fuel, the ammo get there in time? The Foreign Minister Kuleba was talking to Secretary of State Blinken today and pleading with more help for their Air Force.
Well, there's a lot of aid coming in from NATO countries, including from this country, and it's coming in fast. I think the reality, though, and we have to be clear-eyed about this, Andrea, that the Russians have the advantage. They're surrounding this country on three sides. They're getting cooperation more than they should, in my opinion, from Belarus, and they have the firepower. The Ukrainian resistance and their army has been just absolutely incredible. I think the Russians were expecting a 3-day war, and it's now looking like it's going to be a much longer slog. But the reality is, as I said at the beginning, I fear that they're going to turn this into another Chechnya, where they just carpet bombed civilians. And as Putin gets angrier and angrier and lashes out, I think that's the most immediate danger. And of course, the secondary immediate danger is that he lashes out at the West, probably in the form of cyber attacks. We're already seeing changes here in terms of gas prices and energy prices generally. I worry about a cyber attack, which I think is something that they have to be contemplating. It's part of Putin's playbook.
Well, the Senate passed legislation, as you well know, yesterday requiring critical infrastructure owners to report to the federal government when they suffer a major cyber attack. That should seem basic. We were talking to Ann Neuberger just about a few minutes ago about the increased cooperation, how Microsoft discovered malware and notified the White House. The White House notified Ukraine. Microsoft helped disarm or fix, the malware. But is there enough cooperation, and do we need more laws than this?
Well, the bill that passed last night is one of the most important cyber pieces of legislation in the past 10 years. It's been a missing piece, and it couldn't come at a more important time. We're never going to be invulnerable because the cyber realm evolves continuously, but we're way ahead of where we were a couple of years ago. And I have to say that a lot of the federal government can do a lot, and we are doing a lot, but cyber defense starts at the desktop. 85% of cyber attacks start with somebody clicking on a phishing email. And people just have to bear that in mind and be much more careful, particularly if you're in a critical infrastructure industry, the finance sector, the energy sector, pipelines, water. That's where the danger is. As I say, the government is doing a lot, but individuals have to do it too. This is one where it's an unusual situation. Conflict normally you think of as between armies and armies and navies and navies. In this case, the target space is in the private sector. And we're doing all we can to help protect them. And the bill passed last night is a huge step forward. But the private sector has to step up too and really develop over the next week a heightened sense of urgency.
Just very briefly, are you surprised that Putin hasn't done more to attack Ukraine on cyber, or even us?
I have. I expected a much more substantial cyber attack on Ukraine going in. They have started that to some extent, and there were some sort of desultory attacks at the beginning on some of the Ukrainian banks. But I expect there will be more of that. And the danger here is that Putin is cornered. He made a major miscalculation, and he's a guy that doesn't admit error very much, and he's gotten out in front of the world on this, and he's going to pay a very heavy price. I just hope they can find an off-ramp. If he's smart, that's what he'll do. Otherwise, he's already lost Ukraine. The Ukraine will never be a part of Russia, given what they've done to that country. And like I say, he's losing great ground in terms of his economy. The question, Andrea, is does he care about the effect on the Russian people? He's going to have his Mercedes and his Dacia. So the question is, will the sanctions actually affect him? Hopefully, it's going to start to penetrate his inner circle and he'll start listening. But right now, he's the most dangerous man in the world.
Senator King, thank you. Thanks for being with us.